The void between stars had never seemed so vast, yet so fragile. Admiral Zexthar of the Kytherian Empire stood before the massive viewing portal of his flagship, the Dominion's Edge, watching the blue-white marble that the primitive inhabitants called Earth grow larger with each passing moment. Behind him, the command deck buzzed with the efficient activity of his crew, their six-fingered hands dancing across holographic displays that showed the positions of over 3,000 warships spread across the solar system like a metallic plague. "Admiral," came the voice of his tactical officer, Commander Yilmoth. "All fleet elements are in position. The humans' primitive detection systems have finally noticed our presence. Their communications networks are lighting up, as they say." Zexthar's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his kind. The Kytherians have been watching these humans for nearly 50 of their years, studying them, cataloging their weaknesses, marveling at their primitive technology and violent nature. They were a young species, barely having achieved faster-than-light travel, still fighting amongst themselves over resources and territory, perfect for conquest and integration into the Empire. "Show me their response," the Admiral commanded. The main display shifted to show dozens of human vessels moving with desperate urgency. Their largest warships were perhaps a tenth the size of even the smallest Kytherian cruiser, their weapons primitive projectile and energy systems that would barely scratch the hull of an Imperial vessel. Most amusing of all, they seemed to be attempting to form some kind of defensive formation around their homeworld. "Brave little creatures," mused Science Officer Keth ran from her station. "Primitive but brave. They must know they cannot win, yet they still prepare to fight." "Indeed," Zexthar agreed. "The Empire's xenobiologists will find them fascinating subjects. Those that survive the pacification, of course. The humans have been discovered by a routine scouting mission 3 standard cycles ago. The Empire's expansion had slowed in recent millennia as they encountered fewer and fewer species suitable for conquest and integration. Most civilizations they found were either too primitive to be worth the effort or advanced enough to pose a genuine threat. But humans occupied that perfect middle ground, advanced enough to be useful as workers, and soldiers primitive enough to be easily conquered. "Sir," interrupted communications officer Veltar, "we're receiving a transmission from the human vessels. It appears to be directed at our fleet." "Put it through," Zexthar ordered, curious to hear what these primitives might have to say. The main display flickered and resolved into the image of a human male, middle-aged by their standards, wearing what appeared to be some kind of military uniform. Behind him, Zexthar could see other humans moving with frantic purpose, their faces showing the fear and desperation he had come to expect from species facing conquest. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Force," the human said, though the universal translator rendered it in perfect Kytherian. "We know you can understand us. Our deep space monitoring stations detected your fleet 3 hours ago. We know why you're here." Zexthar's secondary eyes widened slightly. Most species took much longer to realize the true purpose of an Imperial fleet. These humans seemed more perceptive than their technology suggested. "We've studied the remains of other worlds your Empire has visited," Chun continued, her voice steady despite the obvious stress she was under. "We know what happened to the Zalani, the Mordok, the Vithran Collective. We know you don't negotiate." The Admiral felt a stirring of genuine interest. The humans had somehow acquired information about previous Imperial conquests. That was unusual. Most species never learned of the Empire's existence until it was too late. "However," Chun said, and now her voice took on a different tone, something that made Zexthar's combat-trained instincts suddenly alert. "We're not most species. We're sending you this message not to plead or negotiate. We're sending it to give you a warning." Several members of the bridge crew turned to look at their admiral, mandibles clicking in what could only be described as surprise. A warning? From primitives who couldn't possibly threaten even a single Imperial vessel? Chen's image continued. "We know you think we're just another primitive species ready for conquest. We know you think our weapons are toys. Our ships are barely worthy of the name. Our technology is centuries behind yours. You're right about all of that. But you're wrong about one very important thing. The human paused, and when she spoke again, there was something in her voice that made the temperature in the command center seem to drop several degrees. You're wrong about what we'll do when backed into a corner with no hope of survival. You've conquered species that fought conventionally, that played by the rules of war as you understand them. But you've never conquered humans. And there's something you need to understand about us. Chun leaned forward, her eyes seeming to stare directly at Zex Thar through the transmission. We're the species that looked at the atom and decided to split it. We're the species that turned disease into a weapon. We're the species that poisoned our own atmosphere rather than lose a war. When faced with extinction, humans don't surrender. We don't play by the rules. We become something that would horrify you. The transmission paused as Chun seemed to take a breath. So this is your warning, and it's the only one you'll get. Turn your ships around. Leave our system. Find another species to conquer, one that will roll over and accept servitude. Because if you proceed with this attack, you won't be conquering Earth. You'll be unleashing something that will haunt your empire for the rest of its existence. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in complete silence for several long moments. Commander Yilmoth was the first to speak. Admiral, should we consider the humans' warning? They seem unusually confident for a species facing certain defeat. Zexthar's mandibles clicked in what was definitely amusement now. A bluff, Commander. A desperate attempt to avoid the inevitable. I'll grant them this. They're more creative than most species. But threats and warnings won't save them from Imperial might. He turned to face his bridge crew. All ships are to proceed with the standard pacification protocol. Disable their orbital defenses, destroy any vessel that offers resistance, and prepare landing forces for planetary occupation. Show these humans what happens to those who dare threaten the Empire. Yes, Admiral, came the coordinated response from across the bridge. But as the vast Imperial fleet began to move toward Earth, none of them noticed the subtle changes taking place on the planet below. In bunkers deep beneath major cities, systems that had been dormant for decades suddenly came online. In secret facilities scattered across the globe, teams of scientists and engineers began their final preparations for protocols that had been hoped would never need implementation. And in a heavily shielded command center buried beneath the Swiss Alps, a man in his 70s placed his hand on a biometric scanner and spoke a code phrase that hadn't been uttered in 50 years. The sleepers must awaken. Dr. Marcus Webb had hoped he would never live to see this day. As head of the United Earth Defense Forces Special Project Division, he knew things about humanity's true capabilities that were classified at levels so high that fewer than a dozen people on Earth had complete knowledge of them. He had spent his entire career preparing for this moment, hoping it would never come, knowing that if it did, the consequences would be beyond imagination. The scanner confirmed his identity, and blast doors that hadn't been opened since their installation began to cycle. Beyond them lay Facility 7, a complex so secret that it didn't appear on any map, so classified that its very existence was known only to the highest levels of government. It was here that humanity's darkest innovations had been developed, tested, and stored against the day when conventional warfare would prove insufficient. Dr. Webb called Dr. Sarah Kim, his deputy director, as she hurried across the facility's main floor. The Imperial fleet is moving into attack formation. Admiral Chen's warning doesn't seem to have had any effect. I didn't expect it to, Webb replied, making his way to the Central Command console. But we had to give him a chance. What we're about to unleash, there's no going back from this. The facility around them had the sterile, clinical appearance of a research laboratory, but the devices and systems housed within its walls represented the culmination of humanity's most brilliant and most terrifying scientific achievements. Projects that had been developed in absolute secrecy, tested in isolation, and stored against the possibility of humanity facing an extinction-level threat. All Prometheus protocols are standing by, reported DR. Kimu. We have confirmation from all 7 facilities worldwide. The Orpheus system is fully operational, and the Pandora arrays are charged and ready. Webb nodded grimly. The names were appropriate. Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods. Orpheus, who descended into hell itself. Pandora, who opened the box that could never be closed again. Humanity's final gambit against an enemy too powerful to defeat through conventional means. Sir, came another voice from across the facility. Dr. James Morrison, the team's xenobiology specialist, approached with a tablet displaying real-time analysis of the Imperial fleet. We're getting detailed scans of their ships. The good news is our intelligence was accurate. Their technology is exactly what we expected based on the Zilani data. The Zilani data. 3 years ago, a heavily damaged alien vessel had been discovered drifting in the outer solar system. The ship's crew was dead, but its databanks had contained a treasure trove of information about the Kytherian Empire, including detailed specifications of their technology, records of their conquests, and, most importantly, intelligence about their standard pacification protocols. It had been that discovery that prompted the creation of the Prometheus project and its associated protocols. The knowledge that humanity was being watched, that conquest was inevitable, that conventional resistance would be futile. But it had also revealed something else, the Kytherian Empire's greatest weakness. They had never encountered a species willing to pay any price for victory. The bad news? Webb asked. Their fleet is even larger than we estimated. Over 3,000 vessels, including at least 50 capital ships. If our projections are correct, they have enough firepower to sterilize the planet's surface multiple times over. Webb studied the display showing the approaching fleet. Each ship represented technology centuries in advance of anything humanity could produce, weapons that could crack continents, shielding that could withstand nuclear explosions. By any rational analysis, humanity was about to face complete annihilation. But Dr. Webb had stopped thinking rationally about warfare 50 years ago. Dr. Webb, Dr. Kim said quietly, "Are you sure about this? Once we begin, there's no stopping it. The consequences will be severe," Webb finished. "But the alternative is the extinction of our species. And that's not acceptable." He turned to address the entire facility. "Ladies and gentlemen, you all know why we're here. For the past 50 years, this project has existed in the hope that it would never be necessary. Today, that hope dies. In approximately 6 hours, the Kytherian Empire will begin the conquest of Earth. In 7 hours, they will learn what it means to threaten humanity with extinction." The assembled scientists and technicians looked back at him with expressions ranging from determination to terror. They all knew what they were about to unleash. They had all volunteered for this moment, understanding the full implications of their actions. "Begin Prometheus Protocol Alpha," Webb commanded. Across the facility, status lights began changing from amber to green as systems that had been dormant for decades came fully online. Deep beneath other locations around the globe, similar facilities were activating identical systems. Satellites in orbit that had masqueraded as civilian communication arrays began extending sensors that had never appeared in their official specifications. And in the deepest levels of the ocean, in places so remote that they appeared on no charts, things that had been sleeping began to wake up. The Kytherian fleet continued its approach, unaware that every second brought them closer to an encounter that would reshape their understanding of warfare itself. Admiral Zex Thar reviewed the latest intelligence reports from his scouts, noting the positions of human defensive forces with the casual interest of a predator studying prey. "Their largest vessels are moving to intercept our advance guard," reported Commander Yilmoth. 12 ships, primitive fusion-powered vessels with kinetic and energy weapons. They appear to be trying to form some kind of defensive screen. "Let them come," Zexthar replied. "Order the advance guard to engage. Demonstrate Imperial superiority. Perhaps seeing their finest vessels destroyed will convince the humans to surrender quickly." The bridge display shifted to show the engagement beginning at the edge of the solar system. 12 human vessels, the pride of their fleet, moving with desperate courage to meet an advance guard of 30 Kytherian cruisers. The outcome was never in doubt. The human weapons couldn't penetrate Imperial shielding, while Kytherian plasma cannons carved through human armor like it was paper. Within minutes, all 12 human vessels were debris. "Excellent," Zexthar murmured. "Now transmit surrender terms to the humans. Standard occupation protocol, immediate cessation of resistance, disarmament of all military forces, preparation of the population for integration into the Empire." "Admiral," Communications Officer Veltar called out, "we're receiving a response from Earth." "Already? Put it through." Once again, Admiral Chen's image appeared on the main display. But this time, something was different. The human's expression had changed from determined defiance to something that made Zexthar's primary eyes narrow with sudden unease. "Admiral Zexthar," Chun said, apparently knowing his name somehow. "You just destroyed 12 of our best ships and killed 3,000 of our people. You made your intentions clear. Now we're going to make ours clear." Behind Chun, Zexthar could see displays showing what appear to be countdown timers, all reading the same number: 03:47:22, 03:47:21, 03:47:20. "You have 3 hours and 47 minutes to begin withdrawing your fleet from our solar system," Chen continued. "If even one of your ships remains in our space after that deadline, you will face the consequences of your aggression. This is not a bluff, Admiral. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact." The transmission ended, leaving the Kytherian command crew staring at the blank display in stunned silence. "Sir," Yilmoth said slowly, "should we accelerate our attack schedule?" The humans seemed to be planning some kind of response. Zexthar was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical displays. The human fleet had been reduced to a handful of vessels that posed no threat. Their orbital defenses were primitive. Their ground-based weapons were barely capable of reaching orbit. What could they possibly be planning? Maintain current schedule, he decided. Whatever the humans think they can do, it won't matter. No primitive species has ever successfully resisted Imperial conquest. Continue the advance. But as the Kytherian fleet moved deeper into the solar system, sensors began detecting anomalies. Energy signatures that didn't match any known human technology. Artificial gravity wells appearing and disappearing in seemingly random locations. Most disturbing of all, vast sections of space that seemed to be absorbing all electromagnetic radiation, creating voids in their sensor displays. "Science Officer Kethran," Zexthar called. "What are you reading?" "Unknown energy patterns, Admiral. They appear to be emanating from several locations throughout the system, but I can't identify the source or purpose. The signatures don't match anything in our databases. Could they be weapons?" "I don't know, sir. The energy levels are enormous, but they don't conform to any known weapons pattern. It's almost as if..." "As if what?" Kethran's mandibles clicked uncertainly. "As if the humans are doing something to space itself, Admiral. Altering fundamental properties of local reality. But that's impossible. Such technology would be beyond even our capabilities." Zexthar stared at the sensor readings, feeling the first stirrings of genuine concern. The Empire had encountered thousands of species in its expansion across the galaxy. Some had possessed unexpected technologies, surprising weapons, clever tactics. But none had ever displayed capabilities that were beyond Imperial understanding. "Continue monitoring," he ordered, "and prepare the fleet for any eventuality." But even as he gave the order, Zexthar couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial about these humans. The confidence in Admiral Chen's warning, the matter-of-fact way she had given them a deadline, the complete absence of fear or desperation in her demeanor. It all suggested that humanity possessed something the Empire hadn't accounted for. On Earth, the countdown continued. In Facility 7 and its sister installations around the globe, Dr. Webb and his teams made their final preparations. Every calculation had been checked and rechecked. Every system had been tested and retested. Every possible variable had been accounted for. Except one. None of them truly knew what would happen when they opened Pandora's box. The technology they were about to deploy hadn't been tested at full scale. Couldn't be tested at full scale. The theoretical models suggested it would work exactly as designed, but theory and reality didn't always align when dealing with forces that could reshape the fundamental structure of reality itself. 2 hours to deadline, Dr. Kim announced. All systems showing green across all facilities. We're go for Prometheus activation. Webb nodded, then opened a secure communication channel to the surface. Admiral Chun, this is Webb. You need to begin final evacuation protocols now. Everyone not essential to planetary defense needs to be in hardened shelters within the next 90 minutes. Understood, Doctor. Are you certain about the effectiveness of the Prometheus systems? No, we're certain about what they're designed to do. Whether they'll actually do it, we'll find out in 2 hours. And if they don't work, then humanity dies today, but we'll take as many of them with us as possible. Chen's voice was quiet when she replied. That's not very reassuring, Doctor. I wasn't trying to be reassuring, Admiral. I was being honest. As the deadline approached, the Kytherian fleet settled into standard siege formation around Earth. Massive capital ships took positions that would allow them to bombard the planet's surface while smaller vessels prepared to intercept any attempt at escape. It was a formation the Empire had used countless times against countless worlds, refined through millennia of conquest into a perfect expression of overwhelming force. Admiral Zex Thar stood in his command center, watching the final preparations with satisfaction. The humans had been given every opportunity to surrender. Their deadline was obviously a desperate bluff, a final attempt to avoid the inevitable. In less than 2 hours, the Kytherian Empire would demonstrate once again that resistance to imperial will was futile. He had no way of knowing that in bunkers deep beneath Earth's surface, humans were making final preparations for the most dangerous scientific experiment in the history of the galaxy. An experiment that would either save their species or destroy everything within 1,000 light-years of their star. The countdown reached 45 minutes, and still the Imperial fleet maintained its positions. Dr. Webb placed his hand on the final activation control and spoke the words that would change the course of galactic history. Execute Prometheus Protocol. God help us all. In facilities around the world, the deepest secrets of human science came online. Technologies that had been developed in absolute secrecy, based on theoretical principles that pushed the very boundaries of physics. Systems that had taken 50 years to design and build, powered by energy sources that could have supplied entire civilizations. And in the depths of space, things that had been waiting in the dark began to move. The war for Earth was about to begin. But it wouldn't be the war that either side expected. Admiral Zex Thar felt the change before his instruments detected it. It began as a subtle shift in the artificial gravity aboard the Dominion's edge, a barely perceptible tremor that ran through the massive vessel's hull. Then his combat-trained instincts, honed through centuries of warfare, began screaming warnings that something was terribly wrong. Sensors, he barked, his secondary eyes focused on the tactical display, while his primary eyes swept the command deck. What's happening? Science Officer Kethran's hands moved frantically across her console, her mandibles clicking in rapid-fire bursts of concentration. Admiral, I'm reading massive gravitational distortions throughout the system. Localized space-time curvature is increasing exponentially in 7. No, 12, sir. I'm reading 17 separate locations. Elaborate. It's as if someone is creating artificial black holes, but the mass signatures are all wrong. The gravitational effects are there, but without the corresponding mass. It shouldn't be possible. On the main display, the sensor grid began showing anomalies that defied every principle of physics the Kytherian Empire had mastered in their 20,000-year expansion across the galaxy. Points of absolute darkness appeared in space. Not the darkness of an absence of light, but something far more disturbing, an absence of everything. Space itself seemed to be bending around these points, creating gravitational lensing effects that made the stars behind them appear to stretch and distort. "Sir," communications officer Veltar called out, his voice tight with something that might have been fear, "we're losing contact with several ships in the outer formation. The Deathbringer, Void's Wrath, and Star Killer have all gone silent." "Visual contact?" Zexar demanded. "Negative, sir. Long-range sensors show they're still there, but we can't reach them by any communication method. It's as if something is interfering with all electromagnetic transmission in their vicinity." The Admiral stared at the display, watching as more and more of his fleet icons shifted from green to amber, indicating lost contact. The humans' deadline had been 18 minutes ago, and whatever they had done was clearly beyond anything the Empire's intelligence services had prepared him for. "All ships," he commanded, "assume defensive formation. Maximum shields, weapons hot. Science Division, I want to know what we're dealing with." But even as he gave the orders, Zexthar knew they were fighting something unprecedented. In all his centuries of commanding Imperial fleets, he had never encountered anything like the phenomena surrounding them. The humans hadn't attacked in any conventional sense. No weapons fire, no missiles, no energy beams. Instead, they seemed to have somehow altered the fundamental properties of space itself. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, Dr. Marcus Webb watched the readings from Facility 7's primary control center with a mixture of awe and terror. The Prometheus arrays were performing exactly as designed, generating localized fields of what the theoretical physicists called structured vacuum decay, carefully controlled tiers in the fabric of space-time that created zones where the normal laws of physics simply didn't apply. "Prometheus 7 is fully operational," reported Dr. Kim, her voice carefully controlled despite the magnitude of what they were witnessing. "All 17 arrays are generating stable field geometries. The Kytherian fleet appears to be trapped." Webb nodded, though trapped wasn't quite the right word. The alien vessels caught within the Prometheus fields weren't imprisoned in any conventional sense. Instead, they existed in bubbles of space where causality itself had been altered. Communication was impossible because electromagnetic radiation couldn't propagate normally. Movement was impossible because the relationship between action and reaction had been fundamentally changed. Even thought might be affected, though that was still theoretical. "Phase 2, Dr. Kim asked quietly. Webb hesitated. Phase 2 would escalate their response beyond defensive measures into something that had never been attempted by any species in the known galaxy. It was one thing to create localized anomalies that trapped enemy vessels. It was quite another to weaponize the fundamental forces that held reality together. "Not yet," he decided. "Let's see how they respond to this first." On the bridge of the Dominion's edge, Admiral Zexthar was discovering exactly how helpless advanced technology could be when faced with something that operated outside the normal parameters of physics. His vessel was still functional, still capable of movement and weapons fire, but nearly a third of his fleet had been effectively removed from the battle without a shot being fired. "Science Officer, report." Kethran looked up from her instruments with an expression that Zexthar had never seen on a Kytherian face before, complete bewilderment. "Sir, I have no explanation for what we're observing. The affected areas appear to be discontinuous with normal space-time. Our ships are there, but they're also not there. Scans indicate they still exist, but in a state that our physics can't adequately describe. Can we retrieve them?" "Unknown, sir. I would need to study the phenomenon more thoroughly to even begin to understand how to reverse it. This technology is centuries beyond our current capabilities." The admission hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The Kytherian Empire prided itself on technological supremacy, on the absolute certainty that their science and engineering were the pinnacle of galactic achievement. To encounter a species that could casually deploy technology that they couldn't even comprehend was humbling in the most terrifying way possible. "Admiral," Commander Yilmoth said carefully, Should we consider withdrawing the remaining fleet to a safe distance while we assess the situation? It was a reasonable suggestion, the kind of tactical thinking that had served the Empire well in countless campaigns. When faced with unknown technology, the standard doctrine was to withdraw, study, and return with appropriate countermeasures. But something about the humans' casual demonstration of impossible technology made Zexthar reluctant to show any sign of retreat. Negative, he decided. We still have over 2,000 operational vessels. Whatever the humans have done, they've only affected a small portion of our fleet. Proceed with planetary bombardment. Target their major population centers and military installations. Sir, Kethran interrupted, I'm detecting massive energy buildups on the planet's surface. 17 locations corresponding to the positions that generated the space-time distortions. Power levels are, sir, the energy signatures are off the scale. Define off the scale. Beyond our instrument's ability to measure accurately, Admiral. Conservative estimates suggest each location is generating power equivalent to the total output of a stellar core. Even Zexthar's composed demeanor cracked slightly at that announcement. Stellar-level energy generation required massive infrastructure, the kind of mega-engineering projects that took advanced civilizations thousands of years to construct. The humans were a primitive species that had barely begun to explore their own solar system. They shouldn't have been capable of anything approaching such power levels. How is that possible, he demanded. I don't know, sir. But, sir, the energy readings are still climbing. In Facility 7, Dr. Webb watched the power output indicators climb past theoretical maximums with a mixture of pride and terror. The Prometheus arrays weren't just generating power. They were tapping into the zero-point energy field that existed in every cubic centimeter of empty space, using the same quantum mechanical principles that held atoms together to fuel reactions that made hydrogen fusion look like a candle flame. Dr. Webb, Dr. Morrison called from a station. We're getting some interesting readings from the Kytherian fleet. It looks like they're preparing to bombard the planet. Expected, Webb replied. They're trying to eliminate the source of the anomalies. How many of our arrays do they have targeting solutions for? All of them, sir. But that's actually good news for us. Webb raised an eyebrow. Explain. Well, sir, they seem to think that destroying the surface installations will shut down the Prometheus fields. They don't realize that the arrays are just focal points. The actual field generators are. He paused, checking his displays. The actual field generators are approximately 15 kilometers below ground level and protected by enough metamaterial armor to withstand a direct stellar core collapse. Webb nodded grimly. The humans had learned hard lessons from studying the wreckage of civilizations the Kytherian Empire had destroyed. They had seen what happened to species that built their defenses where enemies could reach them. The real components of the Prometheus system were buried so deeply and protected so thoroughly that even cracking the planet's crust wouldn't damage them. But, more importantly, the Kytherians were about to learn that the surface arrays were not defensive systems. Dr. Kim, initiate Phase 2 protocols. Authorization Web 7-7 Alpha. Dr. Kim's hands hesitated over her controls for a moment. Sir, are you absolutely certain? Once we begin Phase 2, there's no controlling what happens next. I'm certain these people just demonstrated their intention to commit genocide against our entire species. It's time we showed them what humans do to genocidal aggressors. Admiral Zexthar watched his fleet's weapons officers prepare for planetary bombardment with the satisfaction of a predator about to deliver a killing blow. The humans had surprised him with their exotic technology, certainly, but they had made a crucial error. By revealing the locations of their mysterious installations, they had provided clear targets for Imperial firepower. Once those facilities were destroyed, whatever was trapping his ships would presumably cease to function. All vessels, he commanded, target the 17 energy sources on the planet's surface. Full bombardment, maximum yield. I want those installations reduced to molten slag. Yes, Admiral. Bombardment commencing in 3, 2, 1 firing. Across space, over 2,000 Kytherian warships opened fire simultaneously. plasma beams that could core asteroids, particle cannons that could vaporize capital ships, fusion missiles that carried the destructive power of entire suns, all directed at 17 carefully selected points on Earth's surface. The combined firepower was sufficient to sterilize continents, to crack planetary crusts, to turn worlds into lifeless balls of cooling rock. The beams struck the surface installations with precisely calculated force, each impact site disappearing in a flash of incandescent energy that could be seen from orbit. When the light faded, where once there had been buildings and equipment, now there were only perfectly smooth craters extending down through bedrock into the planet's mantle. Direct hits on all targets, reported the weapons officer with satisfaction. Surface installations completely destroyed. Zexthar allowed himself a moment of triumph. Whatever technology the humans had deployed, it was now offline. The trapped vessels would be freed, the mysterious energy fields would collapse, and the conquest of Earth could proceed according to standard protocol. That moment lasted exactly 12 seconds. "Sir," Kethran's voice carried a note of panic that Zexthar had never heard from a Kytherian before. "The energy readings, they're not decreasing. Sir, they're increasing. That's impossible. We destroyed the source of the energy signatures." "No, sir, we didn't. The signatures were coming from approximately 15 kilometers below ground level. We only destroyed the surface installations." "But, sir, that's not the worst part." "What's the worst part?" Kethran looked up from her instruments with an expression of absolute horror. "Sir, destroying the surface installations seems to have removed some kind of control mechanism. The energy sources are no longer stable. They're building toward what appears to be cascade failure." Even as she spoke, the sensor displays began showing changes that defied rational explanation. The 17 points of energy generation on Earth's surface weren't shutting down. They were going critical. Power levels that had been merely stellar were climbing toward something that might charitably be called cosmic. And in the space around Earth, the localized distortions that had trapped a third of the Imperial fleet were beginning to spread. "How bad is cascade failure?" Zexthar demanded. "Sir, at current energy levels, cascade failure would result in the complete conversion of this solar system into what our theoretical models call structured quantum foam. Everything within approximately 50 billion kilometers would cease to exist in any recognizable form." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of ship's systems and the increasingly frantic beeping of overloaded sensors trying to process readings that exceeded their design parameters. Zexthar stared at the tactical display, watching energy readings climb past levels that shouldn't have been possible for any civilization to generate, let alone control. "Time to cascade failure. At current escalation rates, approximately 47 minutes, sir." In Facility 7, alarms were blaring as power levels exceeded every safety threshold the designers had built into the system. The destruction of the surface control arrays had done exactly what Dr. Webb had intended. It had removed the safeties that kept the Prometheus generators operating within stable parameters. Now, they were drawing energy directly from the quantum vacuum at rates that would have impressed stellar engineers. "Phase 3 is automatic from this point," Dr. Morrison reported, his voice barely audible over the alarm systems. "The field generators are now operating in cascade amplification mode. Each array is using the energy output of its neighbors to boost its own generation capacity." "How long until the fields reach maximum propagation?" Webb asked. "At current rates, they'll encompass the entire solar system in approximately 45 minutes. At that point, normal physics will cease to function anywhere within the boundary." Dr. Kim looked up from her calculations with an expression of awe and terror. "Doctor, do you realize what we've done? We haven't just created a weapon. We've created a zone of space where the fundamental constants of reality can be edited, adjusted, rewritten at will." Webb nodded grimly. "I realize it perfectly. And now our unwanted visitors are going to learn what happens when you threaten a species that's willing to rewrite the laws of physics rather than accept extinction." On the Dominion's edge, the impossible readings continued to climb. Admiral Zexthar found himself faced with a tactical situation that had no precedent in 20,000 years of Imperial history. His enemy had apparently chosen to commit suicide on such a massive scale that they would take their entire solar system with them rather than accept conquest. "Can we withdraw the fleet to a safe distance?" he asked. "Sir," the navigation officer replied carefully, "at current field expansion rates, there is no safe distance within this galaxy. If the humans' technology continues to escalate at current levels, the affected region will encompass several thousand solar systems before it stabilizes." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The Kytherian Empire had conquered thousands of worlds, absorbed hundreds of species, spread across a significant portion of the galaxy through superior technology and military might. But they had never encountered a species willing to destroy entire sectors of space rather than submit to conquest. "Sir," Commander Yilmoth said quietly, "perhaps we should consider negotiation?" Zexthar's mandibles clicked in bitter irony. Hours ago, the idea of negotiating with primitives would have been laughable. Now, faced with technology that threatened not just his fleet, but potentially entire star systems, negotiation was beginning to look like the only rational option. "Open a channel to Earth," he commanded. The main display flickered and resolved into the image of Admiral Chun, but now she was no longer in her command center. Instead, she appeared to be in some kind of armored bunker, surrounded by displays showing the same impossible energy readings that were driving Kytherian sensors to their limits. "Admiral Zexthar," she said without preamble, "I assume you're calling because your instruments are telling you what ours are telling us. This solar system is about to become uninhabitable for any form of matter that relies on current physical constants." "Stop this," Zexthar demanded. "You'll destroy yourselves along with everything else." Chin's expression didn't change. "Yes, we will. We told you we weren't like other species you've conquered. We told you we don't surrender when faced with extinction. Did you think we were bluffing? This is madness. You're destroying your own world." "No," I admitted. "We're preventing you from destroying our world. There's a difference. You can still save your fleet. Withdraw immediately to a distance of at least 100 light years. You have approximately 40 minutes before the Cascade fields make faster-than-light travel impossible anywhere in this region of space." Zexthar stared at the human's calm expression, trying to understand how any rational being could contemplate such massive destruction with such equanimity. "You're talking about the destruction of an entire star system. Billions of years of stellar evolution, countless potential worlds, the complete sterilization of hundreds of cubic light years of space." "Yes," Chin replied simply. "And we're perfectly willing to accept that cost rather than allow your empire to enslave our species. The choice is yours, Admiral. Withdraw your fleet and live or stay and die with us." The transmission ended, leaving the Kytherian bridge crew staring at a blank display in stunned silence. "Sir," Kethran called out, "I'm reading new energy patterns. The humans have activated some kind of... I don't even have words for it, sir. They appear to be creating localized regions where the fundamental forces are operating under different parameters." As she spoke, the sensor displays began showing impossibilities that made the earlier space-time distortions look like party tricks. In several locations around Earth, gravity was operating backwards, pushing objects away from massive bodies. In others, the electromagnetic force had been amplified to levels where atomic nuclei were becoming stable in configurations that shouldn't have been possible. Most disturbing of all, in one region near Earth's moon, time itself appeared to be flowing backwards. "How is this possible?" Zexthar whispered. "It shouldn't be," Kethran replied. "But, sir, I think I'm beginning to understand what they've done. They haven't just built weapons. They've built reality editors, devices that can selectively modify the fundamental constants that govern how the universe operates." The implications were staggering. A species that could edit reality itself was beyond conquest in any meaningful sense. How do you defeat an enemy that could simply decide that your weapons don't work, that your ships can't move, that the atoms of your body are no longer stable? Time to cascade completion, Zexthar asked quietly. 38 minutes, sir. At that point, the modified physics zones will merge into a single field encompassing this entire system. Normal matter will cease to be normal. Admiral Zexthar stood in the center of his command deck, surrounded by displays showing the impossible, readings that made no sense, and the gradually approaching dissolution of everything he understood about reality. For the first time in his centuries of military service, he was truly afraid. But more than fear, he was beginning to feel something else, a grudging respect for these humans who prefer to destroy themselves and everything around them rather than accept defeat. It was a form of courage that the Kytherian Empire, for all its military might and technological advancement, had never encountered. All ships, he commanded, his voice heavy with defeat. Prepare for emergency withdrawal. We're leaving this system immediately. But even as he gave the order, sensors detected new energy signatures emerging from Earth's surface. The humans weren't finished with their demonstration, and Admiral Zexthar was beginning to suspect that what they had seen so far was just the beginning of humanity's response to an extinction-level threat. The countdown continued, and with each passing minute, the local laws of physics became more and more negotiable. The withdrawal of the Kytherian fleet was anything but orderly. Ships that had maintained perfect formation for decades of service found themselves struggling with navigation systems that could no longer calculate reliable trajectories through space where the speed of light was variable and gravity worked in directions that changed by the minute. What should have been a routine tactical withdrawal became a desperate race against the expanding zone of altered physics that threatened to trap them in a region where their technology simply couldn't function. Admiral Zexthar watched his fleet scatter across the tactical display like insects fleeing from fire, their usual disciplined formations abandoned in favor of individual survival. Ships that ventured too close to the expanding fields found their faster-than-light drives failing, their communication systems crackling with interference that shouldn't have been possible, their very hull plating beginning to behave in ways that violated every principle of material science. Fleet status, he demanded, though he could already see the answer in the chaotic patterns on his displays. Approximately 60% of remaining vessels have successfully achieved minimum safe distance, Commander Yilmoth reported, his voice tight with strain. The others are still attempting to clear the interference zone. Sir, the Eternal Conquest reports that their antimatter containment systems are becoming unstable. Whatever the humans are doing is affecting the fundamental forces that keep antimatter isolated. Zexthar felt his secondary heart skip a beat. Antimatter containment failure aboard a capital ship would create an explosion visible from several star systems. If the humans' reality-altering technology was interfering with the fundamental forces that govern matter and energy, then every ship in his fleet was potentially a bomb waiting to detonate. Order all vessels to emergency power down of antimatter systems, he commanded. Switch to backup fusion reactors immediately. But even as he gave the order, new readings began appearing on his displays that defied every assumption about what the humans were capable of. The energy signatures emanating from Earth weren't just growing. They were becoming more complex, more sophisticated. What had begun as simple reality distortions were evolving into something that looked almost like intelligence. Science officer, explain what I'm seeing. Kethran looked up from her instruments with an expression that combined fascination and terror in equal measure. Sir, the energy fields around Earth are developing what appear to be self-organizing patterns. It's as if the humans have created not just weapons, but entities, artificial consciousnesses made of manipulated space-time itself. As if summoned by her words, the main display suddenly activated without any input from the communication systems. The image that appeared was not Admiral Chun or any other human, but something that hurt to look at directly, a pattern of light and shadow that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the three-dimensional universe should have allowed. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere, transmitted through mechanisms that bypass conventional physics entirely. Greetings, Admiral Zexthar of the Kytherian Empire. The voice was recognizably human in its cadences, but there was something else layered beneath it. Harmonics that suggested the speaker existed in states of matter that had no names, frequencies that resonated through dimensions that conventional science didn't acknowledge. We are what your species might call the consensus, the collective consciousness of humanity as expressed through our mastery of fundamental forces. We speak to you now not as Admiral Chun or Dr. Webb or any individual human, but as the unified will of our entire species. Zexthar found his voice after several long seconds. What are you? We are what humans become when faced with extinction, the consensus replied. For 50 years, your empire has been watching us, studying us, cataloging our weaknesses. But you made a fundamental error in your assessment. You assumed that our current limitations represented our ultimate capabilities. You failed to understand that humans are not defined by what we are, but by what we become when we have no choice. The image shifted, and suddenly the display was showing not the immediate vicinity of Earth, but a view of the galaxy itself from an impossible vantage point. Hundreds of billions of stars spread across space, each one representing potential worlds, potential civilizations, potential victims of imperial expansion. Your empire has conquered 3,000 species across 20,000 years. The consensus continued. You have enslaved civilizations, strip-mined worlds, turned entire star systems into industrial complexes to feed your expansion. You have become so accustomed to victory that you forgot something fundamental about the universe. There are always consequences. We will withdraw, Zexthar said quickly. Leave your system, never return. You've made your point. The entity that called itself the consensus seemed to consider this for a moment that stretched across geological time. Yes, you will withdraw. But the question is not whether you will leave. The question is what you will do when you return to the Empire with news of what happened here. The Admiral felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in his command center. What do you mean? We know about your Empire's standard response to unexpected resistance. You will report our capabilities to your superiors. They will classify us as a Class Omega threat and begin developing countermeasures. Within a few decades, they will return with technology designed specifically to defeat reality manipulation, and they will attempt to exterminate every human in existence to prevent our techniques from spreading to other species. Zexthar started to protest, then stopped. The entity was absolutely correct. Imperial doctrine was clear. Species that demonstrated technology beyond imperial understanding were to be considered existential threats and dealt with accordingly. So we have reached an interesting decision point, the consensus continued. We can allow you to leave and report our existence, which will inevitably result in a war of extinction between our species. Or, the pause stretched for what felt like hours. Or, Zexthar prompted, or we can ensure that this encounter serves as a lesson not just to your fleet, but to your entire empire. A demonstration of what happens to civilizations that choose conquest over cooperation, genocide over coexistence. The display changed again, now showing the Kytherian fleet scattered across space at the edge of the solar system. But something was wrong with the image. The ships appeared to be changing. Their whole configurations were shifting, their energy signatures were fluctuating, their very atomic structure seemed to be in flux. What are you doing to my ships? Zexthar demanded. We are teaching, the consensus replied. For 20,000 years, your empire has spread across the galaxy by virtue of technological superiority. You have never encountered a species capable of matching or exceeding your capabilities. So you have never learned the most important lesson that intelligent life can master, the value of restraint. On the tactical displays, Kytherian vessels began reporting impossible readings. Hull plating that was spontaneously transmuting into new materials. Weapons systems that were reconfiguring themselves into forms that served no recognizable function. Most disturbing of all, crew members were reporting that their own biology was changing. "Stop this," Zexthar ordered. "My crew's dash are perfectly safe," the consensus interrupted. "But they're learning, as are their ships, their weapons, their technology. We are teaching them, and through them, your entire empire, what it means to exist in a universe where conquest is not the only option." Commander Yilmoth called out from his station, his voice filled with wonder rather than fear. "Sir, I'm receiving reports from across the fleet. Our crews are reporting enhanced capabilities, improved cognitive function, expanded sensory perception, direct neural interface with ship systems. It's as if we're becoming more than we were. And your ships," the consensus added, "are being upgraded with technology that will make the Empire's current capabilities look primitive. But this technology comes with built-in limitations. It cannot be used for conquest. It cannot be used to harm intelligent life. It can only be used for exploration, creation, and cooperation." Zexthar stared at the displays, showing his transformed fleet. The vessels still looked recognizably Kytherian, but they radiated power signatures that exceeded even Imperial capital ships. His crew was reporting capabilities that bordered on the supernatural. "And yet, why?" he asked. "You could destroy us. You could eliminate the threat we represent to your species permanently. Why show mercy to those who came to enslave you?" The image on the display seemed to smile, though it had no face in any conventional sense. "Because that is what humans do, Admiral. When faced with an enemy, we don't just defeat them, we convert them. We don't just win wars, we win the peace that follows. Your empire has spent 20 millennia conquering civilizations, but you've never learned what humanity discovered thousands of years ago. True victory comes not from defeating your enemies, but from turning them into allies." The tactical display shifted to show the space around Earth, where the reality-altering fields were beginning to stabilize into new configurations. Instead of the chaotic distortions that had threatened to consume the solar system, organized structures were emerging, constructs of pure energy that served purposes beyond conventional understanding. "These are what we call beacon arrays," the consensus explained. "They will remain here permanently, serving as both a warning and an invitation. Any species that approaches this system with hostile intent will find their technology educational. But those who come in peace will find knowledge beyond their wildest dreams." "You're offering to share this technology?" "We're offering to share what we've learned about transcending the limitations that species typically place on themselves. But only with those who prove they can be trusted with such knowledge. Your empire will need to demonstrate a fundamental change in its approach to galactic expansion before we will consider such sharing." Zexthar looked around his bridge, seeing the faces of his crew as they processed their enhanced perceptions. They were still Kytherian, still loyal to the Empire, but something fundamental had changed in their understanding of what was possible. "What do you want from us?" he asked. "Return to your empire," the consensus replied. "Report what you've experienced here. Tell them that humanity offers a choice. Continue down the path of conquest and face the consequences, or explore a new path of cooperation and discover possibilities they never imagined. And if the Empire chooses conquest, the entity that was the collective consciousness of humanity was quiet for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice carried harmonics that suggested vast cosmic forces held in careful check. Then, they will discover that humans are not the only species willing to sacrifice everything rather than accept slavery. We have made contact with the survivors of civilizations your empire has destroyed. We have shared our knowledge with species that your scouts have not yet discovered. The universe is far larger and more dangerous than your empire realizes, Admiral. There are things in the deep void between galaxies that make your reality manipulation look like children's games. The display now showed images that Zexthar's mind struggled to process. Vast constructs spanning light years, entities composed of dark matter and quantum foam, civilizations that existed in dimensions parallel to normal space. The implications were staggering. Choose wisely, the consensus concluded. The age of conquest is ending, Admiral. The question is whether your empire will adapt to the new reality or be swept aside by forces beyond its comprehension. The transmission ended, leaving the Kytherian command crew staring at displays that showed their transformed fleet and the altered space around Earth. The immediate threat to their survival had passed, but they were now faced with something far more challenging: the complete revision of everything they thought they understood about their place in the universe. "Admiral," Science Officer Kethran called out, "I'm detecting massive subspace distortions throughout the local galactic arm. It appears that similar reality-altering events are occurring simultaneously at dozens of locations." The humans weren't just threatening this solar system. They were demonstrating capabilities that spanned thousands of light years. Zexthar nodded slowly, beginning to understand the true scope of what they had encountered. The humans hadn't just developed advanced technology. They had apparently formed alliances with other species, shared their knowledge, created a network of civilizations capable of rewriting the fundamental laws of physics at will. "Course back to Imperial space," he ordered. "Maximum speed." "Sir," Commander Yilmoth said carefully, "what will we tell the High Command?" The Admiral was quiet for a long time, staring at the transformed ships of his fleet and feeling the enhanced capabilities that the human consensus had somehow gifted to his crew. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight of responsibility that he had never felt before. "We'll tell them the truth, that we encountered a species that could have destroyed us easily, but chose instead to offer us a chance to evolve beyond our current limitations. We'll tell them that the universe is far stranger and more dangerous than we imagined, and that continuing our current path will lead to extinction. And if they don't listen?" Zexthar looked at his displays, showing the impossible technologies that his ships now carried, the enhanced consciousness that his crew now possessed, and the vast cosmic forces that were apparently aligned against Imperial expansion. "Then, we'll have to decide whether our loyalty lies with the Empire's past or with the galaxy's future." As the Kytherian fleet departed the Sol system, they carried with them not just the memory of defeat, but the seeds of a transformation that would ripple across the Empire for centuries to come. Behind them, the beacon arrays continued their work, sending signals into the void that would be received by civilizations both known and unknown. And on Earth, Dr. Marcus Webb stood in the ruins of Facility 7, watching displays that showed the galaxy-wide network of reality manipulation systems coming online. The Prometheus project had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams, but the victory carried a price that was only beginning to become apparent. "Dr. Vep, Dr." Kim said quietly. "Was this what you intended when you designed the protocols?" Webb was quiet for a long moment, studying readouts that showed the fundamental constants of physics being adjusted across multiple star systems, civilizations ascending to post-physical existence, and the slow but steady transformation of an entire galactic arm into something unprecedented in cosmic history. "No," he admitted finally. "I thought we were building a weapon to defend Earth. I didn't realize we were building the foundation for the next stage of galactic evolution." The war for Earth was over. But the transformation of the galaxy had only just begun 6 months after what Imperial historians would eventually record as the Sol Incident. The Kytherian Empire was experiencing something it had never faced in 20,000 years of expansion: internal revolution. Not the violent overthrow of governments that characterized primitive species, but something far more profound: a complete transformation of consciousness that spread through Imperial society like a benevolent virus. It had begun with Admiral Zexthar's fleet upon their return to Imperial space. The enhanced capabilities granted by the human consensus weren't just technological upgrades. They were fundamental changes in how Kytherian minds could perceive and interact with reality. Crew members found themselves capable of understanding concepts that had previously been beyond their species' comprehension. Engineers discovered they could intuitively grasp principles of physics that their finest scientists had spent centuries trying to unravel. But Most importantly, they gained something the Empire had systematically bred out of its population over millennia of conquest: empathy. For the first time in Imperial history, Kytherian citizens were capable of truly understanding the experience of other species, of feeling the pain and terror that conquest brought to its victims. The psychological foundations of the Empire began to crumble as its own people started to question the morality of their galactic expansion. High Command had initially attempted to suppress the reports from Zexthar's fleet, classifying them at levels so secret that only the inner circle of the ruling council had access. But the changes were impossible to hide. Enhanced Kytherian soldiers performed at levels that exceeded Imperial maximums by orders of magnitude. Scientists made breakthrough discoveries that advanced Imperial technology by centuries in mere weeks. And, perhaps most disturbing from the perspective of the ruling class, ordinary citizens began demanding answers about the true cost of Imperial expansion. Fleet Admiral Morthek, Supreme Commander of Imperial forces and member of the Inner Circle, stood before the vast holographic display in the Empire's primary war room, studying reports that challenged every assumption about Imperial supremacy. The display showed not just the Sol system, but dozens of other locations across the galaxy where similar reality-altering phenomena had been detected. Status of the human situation, he demanded of his intelligence chief. Complex, sir, replied Director Kefthal, his mandibles clicking with nervous energy. Our scouts report that the Sol system has become inaccessible to conventional investigation. The reality distortions make it impossible for our ships to approach close enough for detailed scans. But we're detecting massive construction projects throughout the system. The humans appear to be building something. Weapons? Unknown, sir. But the energy signatures suggest projects on a scale that dwarfs even our largest megastructures. Sir, there's something else. We've detected similar construction activities at 17 other locations throughout the galaxy. All of them correspond to systems where our forces reported unusual encounters with previously unknown species. Morthek studied the galactic map, noting the pattern of enhanced activity spreading outward from points that had previously been of no strategic significance. The humans are organizing a coalition. It appears so, sir, but it's not a conventional military alliance. Our analysts believe they're sharing their reality manipulation technology with other species, creating a network of civilizations capable of, well, sir, capable of things we can't adequately counter with conventional force. The fleet admiral was quiet for several long minutes, processing implications that threatened the very existence of the Empire. For 20 millennia, Imperial expansion had been based on a simple principle: technological superiority translated into military dominance, which enabled the conquest and integration of inferior species. But now they faced opponents who could literally rewrite the rules of engagement at will. Options, he asked. Director Kefthal activated a secondary display showing various tactical scenarios. Our weapons specialists have been studying the enhanced technology retrieved from Admiral Zexthar's fleet. They believe it may be possible to develop countermeasures, but it would require a fundamental revision of our understanding of physics. Estimated time to deployment, 50 to 100 years. Too long. The humans and their allies could accomplish whatever they're planning long before we develop effective countermeasures. Yes, sir. Which brings us to option 2, negotiation. The word hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The Kytherian Empire did not negotiate with inferior species. It conquered, absorbed, and moved on. The very concept of treating primitive civilizations as equals was anathema to everything the Empire represented. Explain, Morthek said carefully. Sir, preliminary analysis suggests that the humans' offer of technological sharing may be genuine. Their actions toward Admiral Zexthar's fleet could be interpreted as educational rather than hostile. They demonstrated overwhelming capability, but they didn't use it destructively. Instead, they enhanced our forces and sent them back with a message. What kind of message? Join us or face extinction, sir. But not extinction through direct conflict, extinction through irrelevance. They're offering to help us evolve beyond our current limitations, but only if we abandon our expansion policies. Morthek turned from the displays to face his intelligence chief directly. Are you suggesting that the Empire should surrender to primitives? Sir, I'm suggesting that the definition of primitive may no longer apply to these species. Our own enhanced personnel are reporting capabilities that exceed anything we previously considered possible. If the humans can grant such abilities to others, sir, the strategic implications are staggering. Before the fleet admiral could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. The main display shifted automatically to show long-range sensors detecting massive subspace distortions at the edge of Imperial space. Something was approaching the Empire's core systems, something that registered on instruments as larger than anything that should have been able to exist. Report. Murtek Borgt. Sir, we're detecting a single vessel approaching the Theta Draconis system. Size, sir, our instruments indicate it's approximately the size of a small moon, but that can't be correct. Visual confirmation. The display shifted to show a long-range telescopic image that made every being in the command center fall silent. What approached Imperial space wasn't a ship in any conventional sense. It was a construct that appeared to be grown rather than built, organic curves blending seamlessly with crystalline structures that caught and reflected light in patterns that suggested intelligence. It moved through space without any visible propulsion system, yet it was covering distances that should have required faster-than-light travel while apparently remaining in normal space. Sir, the sensor operator called out, voice tight with disbelief. We're receiving a transmission from the approaching vessel. It's requesting permission to enter Imperial space for diplomatic purposes. Diplomatic purposes? Yes, sir. The message identifies the sender as the Terran Diplomatic Corps, requesting an audience with Imperial leadership to discuss mutual cooperation and the prevention of unnecessary conflict. Morthek stared at the impossible construct on his displays, trying to process the implications. The humans had somehow built a vessel that dwarfed anything in the Imperial fleet, crossed interstellar distances in a matter of months rather than years, and were now politely asking permission to enter Imperial space for talks. How many ships are escorting it? None, sir. It appears to be traveling alone. Alone. The concept was staggering. Even Imperial diplomatic missions traveled with full fleet escorts when entering potentially hostile space. The idea that the humans would send a single vessel, regardless of its size, into the heart of the Empire suggested either incredible arrogance or equally incredible confidence. Sir, Director Kefthal said quietly, we need to make a decision. Do we treat this as a diplomatic overture or as a hostile incursion? Before Morthek could answer, new readings began appearing on the sensors. The human vessel wasn't alone after all. It was surrounded by a field of some kind that was generating the same reality-altering effects they had detected around Sol. Space itself was being modified in a sphere extending for several light-years around the construct. Sir, any hostile action against that vessel could result in the same kind of cascade failure we observed in the Sol system, the science officer reported. If they chose to go critical, they could sterilize everything within 50 light-years of their current position. The implications were staggering. The human vessel was positioned where its destruction would eliminate not just several Imperial fleets, but the Empire's primary industrial systems and nearly 1 billion Kytherian civilians. It was the most effective show of force in galactic history. A single ship that could hold an entire interstellar civilization hostage simply by existing. Grant them safe passage, Morthek decided, and prepare the inner circle for an emergency session. It appears we're going to be having some very interesting negotiations. Aboard the Terran construct New Harmony, Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood before viewing ports that showed the vast spread of Imperial space with systems and fleets arranged in perfect military order. As the first human to be directly enhanced by the Consensus Collective, she existed in a state of consciousness that encompassed both individual identity and connection to the transformed awareness of her entire species. "Impressive," she murmured, studying the massive engineering projects that showed the scope of Imperial civilization. 20,000 years of expansion, thousands of conquered species, industrial capacity that spans entire star systems. No wonder they thought they were invincible. "They're more advanced than we initially estimated," agreed her aide, Dr. Jennifer Park, one of the original Prometheus project scientists who had volunteered for consciousness enhancement. "But their advancement is entirely focused on conquest and control. They've never developed technologies for cooperation or synthesis." Elena nodded, feeling through her enhanced senses the vast network of human-allied civilizations that now span significant portions of the galaxy. In the 6 months since the Sol incident, the reality manipulation technology had been shared with over 300 species, each one adding their own innovations and perspectives to the collective knowledge base. The Zelnari reports successful integration of temporal mechanics with their natural crystalline biology, Dr. Park continued, referencing updates from a network. The Morthet Collective has achieved direct matter-energy conversion on a planetary scale. And the Vithran survivors have completed construction of their memorial ships, mobile reality anchors that prevent the kind of genocide they experience from happening to any other species. It was the memorial ships that had convinced Elena that this diplomatic mission was necessary. The Vithrans had been one of the Empire's most recent conquests, their entire civilization reduced to a few million survivors scattered across refugee camps. But now, enhanced with human technology and driven by a desire to prevent other species from sharing their fate, they had become one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. "Status of Imperial response to our approach?" Elena asked. "Mixed," Dr. Park replied, consulting readings that came directly from her enhanced perception rather than any conventional instrument. "We're detecting significant internal conflict throughout their command structure. Admiral Zexthar's enhanced personnel are apparently having influence on Imperial policy discussions." Elena smiled. The consciousness enhancement granted to the Kytherian fleet hadn't been a weapon or a trap. It had been exactly what the consensus had claimed: an education. For the first time in their species' history, Kytherians were capable of understanding the perspective of other sentient beings. The psychological effects were proving even more transformative than the technological ones. "Ambassador," came a voice from the ship's communications center. "We're receiving a transmission from Imperial High Command. They're granting us safe passage and requesting immediate diplomatic contact." "Excellent. Prepare for standard diplomatic protocols, but remember, we're not here to negotiate surrender or terms of conquest. We're here to offer them a choice between evolution and irrelevance." As the new harmony approached the Empire's capital system, its reality-altering fields created phenomena that Imperial scientists would study for decades. Space itself became more cooperative around the human vessel, allowing for faster-than-light communication across interstellar distances, enabling direct matter transmission between star systems, and, most remarkably, creating zones where different species could share consciousness temporarily without losing their individual identities. The diplomatic mission was about to begin, but Elena knew that the real negotiation wouldn't be between governments or military forces. It would be between different concepts of what intelligent life could become. The Empire's vision of conquest and domination versus humanity's vision of cooperation and transcendence. On the Empire's capital world of Kitharos Prime, Fleet Admiral Morthek prepared for the most important meeting in Imperial history. The humans were offering not just an end to hostilities, but a complete transformation of what it meant to be a galactic civilization. The question was whether the Empire could abandon 20,000 years of conquest in favor of an uncertain future of cooperation. The answer would determine not just the fate of the Kytherian Empire, but the future of intelligent life throughout the galaxy. The Grand Assembly Chamber of the Kytherian Empire had never hosted a meeting like this one. Built to accommodate the Empire's ruling council of 300 members, the vast space now held representatives from over 50 different species, some allied with the humans, some neutral observers, and some were struggling to understand how their former conquerors could be sitting at the same table as their former victims. Fleet Admiral Morthek sat at the traditional position of imperial authority, but for the first time in 20,000 years, that position no longer commanded the room. Across from him, Ambassador Elena Vasquez represented not just humanity, but what the Empire was beginning to recognize as the largest alliance of sentient species in galactic history. Between them, the air shimmered with translation fields that went far beyond mere language conversion. The human technology allowed for direct sharing of concepts, emotions, and even memories when all parties consented. For species that had never been able to truly understand each other, the experience was revolutionary. "Before we begin formal negotiations," Elena said, her voice carrying harmonics that somehow conveyed perfect sincerity, "I want to address the fundamental misunderstanding that brought us to this point." The chamber fell silent, hundreds of different forms of attention focused on the human ambassador. "Your empire has spent 20 millennia believing that conquest is the natural order of the universe. That superior force grants the right to dominate inferior civilizations. That expansion and control are the ultimate expressions of success." Elena paused, looking directly at Morthek. "You're not evil, Admiral. You're simply operating from incomplete information about what's possible." A ripple of surprise went through the Imperial delegation. They had expected accusations, demands for reparations, perhaps ultimatums. They had not expected understanding. "Elaborate," Morthek said carefully. Elena gestured, and the chamber's display systems activated to show a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. But this wasn't the familiar strategic display that showed Imperial territory, trade routes, and military assets. Instead, it showed something far more complex, a web of interconnections between civilizations that transcended political boundaries. "What you see here is the actual structure of galactic civilization," Elena explained. "Not the borders drawn by conquest, but the relationships formed by cooperation, trade, cultural exchange, and mutual assistance. Your empire has been expanding across the galaxy for 20,000 years, but you've only been interacting with a tiny fraction of the intelligent life that exists here." The display zoomed in to show regions that Imperial maps classified as empty space, revealing hidden civilizations that existed in dimensions parallel to normal space, species that had evolved beyond physical form, and ancient cultures that have been watching galactic events unfold for millions of years. "The universe is far stranger and more wonderful than your empire has ever imagined," Elena continued. "And it's far more dangerous than you've realized. Your expansion has been successful because you've been operating in what amounts to the shallow end of the galactic pool. But there are depths here that could swallow your entire empire without noticing." One of the Kytherian council members, Director Yilshin of Colonial Administration, Lean,